Hi, everyone. I'm Steve here with Pastor Victor Brote. Thanks for being with us, Pastor.
Thanks.
So we're going to talk about faith again. And, there's multiple examples in the first four books of the New Testament, the Gospels, where Jesus feeds multitudes with a small amount of food. A few loaves of bread and a couple fish. And there's multiple occasions where it describes this. So that's in Matthew 14, 13 through 21. And you guys, I encourage you all to go read it. But let me ask you first, Pastor, what are your first thoughts about how Jesus says, well, you feed them. We don't have enough food. That would cost too much money. He says, you feed them. Here's what we have. And then they start to feed and it keeps going. And then there's more food left over than what they started with after feeding 5,000 people, 5,000 men. So there's probably more. What are your initial thoughts on that?
This kind of thing happens a lot where you need to step out, Joshua and the priest stepping into the river, and then the river stops up. You just find it again and again that sometimes the normal everyday events where you walk through obedience with God, He changes things. And until you take the step in, until you do something you don't even quite understand, that's when God comes to bless the obedience. And it's so great. It is so fun to see God do what you cannot. And I've had that experience personally so many times. And sometimes it's just that little obedience, and sometimes it's a gigantic leap. But Jesus feeds these 5,000. It's something that it's just outside of the bounds of humankind, and yet He just goes beyond it. When He created the world, He spoke it. When He settles accounts in the end of Revelation, He just speaks it. He isn't working hard. He just speaks it. And when we work in coordination with Him through obedience, amazing things happen. God gets to work with us. And I just, every time I think of this passage, it just amazes me because God has, for both you and I, Steve, we know we've ministered together, and God just takes our obedience and multiplies it beyond human capability. And that's the wondrous thing that I see first in this passage.
Yeah, true. And we've both been fortunate to see miracles right before our very eyes that, people wouldn't believe us if we told them. Really that kind of miracles with healing and so on. But it's the action. Jesus was testing them. He was testing their faith, and He was seeing, are you going to trust me? They're going, okay, I got this little bit of bread and a little bit of fish. I'm going to hand it out. Am I going to get killed? I'm going to run out on the first person. And then what are they going to do? Kill me because they didn't get any? So they didn't say, pile it up first, Lord. Pile it up. Pile it up so we can see it all. Then we'll start passing it out. No, they had to act on what He said. And when we act on what God says in the Word of God, whether it has to do with your finances or anything else, that's when I have seen God act. Because faith without action is dead. That's in the book of James. So these apostles acted on what He said. If they didn't, nobody would have got fed. So that's what's amazing to me. And these passages are so good because it reminds us to trust Him, and He can do anything.
And sometimes your small contributions or your small obedience will just do something that is almost inconceivable. And that's our God. That's who He is. He's not doing it in ancient history. He's doing it among His people on a daily basis. And I just encourage you to be obedient when you really hear the word of God, or when it doesn't make sense. But you know that God is telling you to do a thing.
Yeah,
And
just do it.
at the end of this passage, there's more bread left over than they began with. It wasn't something like we just ran out by the last piece. No, God blesses. It's the cup overflows type of thing. God blesses in that manner when we're obedient. And there's just no doubt that God's at work in some of these things as we step out and listen to his callings.
Yeah. And you know, hey everybody, it's last thing I'll say is that it's like the widow's mite. The widow's mite, 2 copper coins, was way more than 2 copper coins. It wasn't just 2 copper coins. What did God do with that? Way more. God doesn't measure like us. So just trust him, everybody. Thanks for being with us, Pastor. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.